Well, as they say, even the losers get lucky sometimes. Is that me? Maybe. And today, we're going to look at my losing teams and find out what I did wrong and what we can maybe avoid for next year. That wasn't just straight bad luck, but perhaps bad Dan. Welcome to Old Man Squad, Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespers. Day 3 of the offseason. I know we probably shouldn't track that, or we're going to get kind of sad by like day 40 or 50 when we still have a long way to go. But I'm doing it for now, and we're just going to keep etching those slashes in the prison wall until I forget where the hell we are. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Vespers. Old Man Squad is the network feed on Twitter. It's also my handle on the Blue Sky Network, should you somehow stumble upon this in the basketball offseason. Play-in tournament is underway. The Orlando Magic snatched up the 7 seed, as did the Golden State Warriors, which I think is pretty much what we all expected would happen. The Atlanta Hawks will play the winner of 9-10 out east, and the Grizzlies will do likewise, the winner of 9-10 out west. Tonight, Miami is in Chicago. That's the Eastern Conference 9-10. Dallas is at Sacramento. Western Conference 9-10. We'll find how everything shakes out after those couple of games, and then we've got a few more days after that. And then the playoffs begin. But you don't give a crap about that. You guys want to hear about fantasy basketball, so that's what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about the Dan Vespers losers, and we're going to start with a pretty damn obvious one. This is a public prize league where I had the 11th pick, and I thought, all right, well, I'm down near the end of the first round. I'll go James Harden, which turned out to be a totally fine end of first round pick. Harden was number 15 in 9-cat. If you happen to be punting turnovers, which was generally the direction you probably should go, roto or head-to-head, he was number 6. He played in 79 games this year. So by totals, even if you weren't punting anything, Harden, I believe, was... Now, if you were punting, he was number 3. If you were not, he was number 5. Either way, very good first-round pick. Second-round pick, not so good. Went Joel Embiid at 14. Figured, all right, I'm going to punt turnovers. We know what Embiid has done over the years. We can, from a turnover standpoint, they're very high. He was at 3.8 last year. 35, there's the family. Spring break, everyone. 35 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists last year, almost 4 turnovers. Between he and Harden, I assumed I was getting around 8 turnovers out of my first 2 guys. But unfortunately, Embiid played in 19 total games this year. And you just, first of all, if you draft that in the second round, you're probably doomed. The only way you escape that is if you ended up with Jokic or Shea, because those guys are so far out in front of everybody else by totals that they were able to basically cover up not getting a second-round pick, which is what Embiid would have been. But I was picking at the end of the first round. So, yeah, I got James Harden, who ended up as an excellent first-round pick. But now, not only am I not getting a second-rounder, I could have had a pretty good one, and I don't get a third-rounder for a long time. Third-round reversal would have helped that a little bit, because then I could have ended up with someone like a Dame, or Shrugs, Devin Booker, or I don't know who fell to the beginning of the third round. LeBron often at the beginning of the third round. So like Jalen Williams would have been in that mix somewhere. There were a bunch of guys that would have been available at the beginning of the third that obviously weren't at the end. And so then I screwed that up also. Not that Freddie VanVleet was, again, a house wrecking, a home wrecker. Not a team wrecking kind of late third round pick, but he wasn't a good one. And it sure would have been nice if I was able to pick from, like, look at these guys who went at the beginning of the third round. Dame. Oh, Sabonis was still there at the beginning of the third round. That would have been a gimme. Why did Brook Lopez go here? Somebody screwed that thing up. Booker went at 30. LeBron went at 33. JJJ. All these guys would have been perfectly reasonable. I could have gone Jalen Johnson. I'm a little, well, he ended up being hurt a bunch. Where was Jalen Williams in this one? Did I skip over him? I must have just missed his name. So VanVleet was a bad one. And then, they're like, that was it. It was lost because I got nothing out of my second rounder. I got not great out of my third rounder. And my draft after that was actually really, really good. Here's 4 through 13. Evan Mobley, good one. Tobias Harris, meh, but not terrible. D'Angelo Russell, not good. Walker Kessler, good. Colin Sexton, fine. Chris Paul in the ninth round, great. Amen Thompson in the 10th, great. Okay, Jonathan Isaac in the 11th was not very good. Cam Johnson in the 12th and Dyson Daniels in the 13th. I had a great draft from 4 through 13, but the league was lost after my first 3 picks, and I stopped setting my lineup at the end of this one, so it's not going to be. Oh, actually, I got up to 810. Like I was just mid pack, decidedly mid pack, and you can see why. My team was number 1 in assists, number 1 in steals, number 1 in blocks. But you know what was missing on this team? Joel freaking Embiid was missing on this team. If I had Embiid, I would have had a much better rank in points, rebounds, threes, free throws, field goal percent. Like all the free throws was fine. I had an 8 there. It would have been better certainly without Walker Kessler, but like this team, if you add in even Joel Embiid playing 50 ball games as a top 5 kind of guy, probably places in the money. And frankly, if Embiid was playing, I would have been paying closer attention to this team. By the midway point of the year, I knew it just like it wasn't going to happen. As good as my late draft was, Evan Mobley and Walker Kessler weren't going to be able to carry me in rebounds and field goal percent. Not when I had Harden and Dyson Daniels, who ended up better as the season went on, but Harden and Freddie VanVleet, like I needed more big men, and I needed it to be Joel Embiid. So, the obvious one here is don't draft Joel Embiid. Um, what could I have done differently there? If we go back to the draft results, you can see who the guys are that went right after me. Chet, who I didn't really want. LaMelo Ball, not good. Cat obviously would have been a much safer play at 17. KD would have been fine. He went at 20. Jalen Williams at 24. Probably not going to take him at 14, but like I could have gone Kevin Durant. The problem is when Embiid was still out there, his per game potential was so much higher than KD that I kind of couldn't talk myself out of it. Should have talked myself out of it. I've talked about it 1,000 times on this show over the years. And I know that Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball has only existed for one full season. But if you go back through all the pods I've ever done on fantasy basketball, I've always talked about how you just don't want to screw up the first 3 rounds. Just get good. Like it doesn't need to be great. First 3 rounds don't need to be great. If I had just had a good, serviceable first 3 rounds, if I had gone Harden, who was I thought a low risk, good upside kind of guy. If I had gone, well, let's see, who could I mean, I guess Cat. Who did I just talk about? Cat, KD, Sabonis would have been a not a massive upside guy, but a durable one. If I had gone, Harden, Sabonis, and then end of the 3rd round. I mean, this was a little bit of a tougher one. I don't know that I could have definitely dodged Freddie VanVleet, but Jalen Johnson. But I didn't feel like I needed Jalen Johnson because I just took Embiid. If I had gone Mobley in the 3rd instead of the 4th, or Cade, Bam, looking at some of the safer plays in there. Bam, Desmond Bain. He's got Derek White, Miles Turner. Like there were a lot of safe plays that I could have gone. That would have been way early on the 3rd round. But some of those other names I just threw out there instead of Freddie, this team would have been fine. Frankly, if I had just replaced Joel Embiid with Domantas Sabonis, this team would have been fine. That's as easy as it would have gotten. In fact, let's see here. What was Sabonis by totals? He did actually miss a few games this year for kind of the first time ever. He was still number 24. He missed a dozen games. If I had gone Harden, Sabonis, even VanVleet in this league, switch the totals. All right, I didn't do this before the season or before the show started, but the difference between Sabonis, who was at 1,300 points, 970 rebounds, 400 assists. I mean, my team won assists anyway. Not that many steals or blocks, but 59% from the field on pretty good volume. Yeah, the turnovers would have been worse. He doesn't help much in 3-pointers, but take that over whatever Embiid's totals were, which is like basically 0. I don't even think he was on the board. This team jumps from mid-pack up to top 4, doing nothing else different. And then, of course, strategy takes over at that point. So just don't screw up the first 3 rounds and you'll be fine. That's the obvious lesson number 1 here. Let's go to where is this other one? What's the next? Okay, I want to go to this one, which um, let me share this tab. So this was another one where I ended up mid pack. And before we do that one, I want to remind you guys of our buddies over at MyBookie. They are our new sports betting partner. Check them out immediately and sign up today using promo code MM50 and you'll get a 50% deposit match bonus on anything up to 2 grand as low as 50 bucks. Put in 50, they'll give you 25. You put in 100, they'll give you 50. You put in the full 2 grand, they'll give you an extra $1,000. And if you've been building up funds at our previous sports betting partner, withdraw, move them over here, get a new deposit match bonus, and let's play with MyBookie until that rollover kicks in. You can just bounce from place to place. Okay, you don't have to say about that, but that's what we're suggesting you do right now. Yes, the Masters are over. Yes, UFC's over for this last weekend. Who cares? You got the NBA play-in tournament. Playoffs are coming up. You got baseball. You got football stuff right around the corner. There's draft stuff going on. There's more golf coming up. There's hockey. Plenty of things to get down on over at MyBookie. Again, that promo code is MM50. Sign up today, and you'll get that 50% deposit match bonus. Let me see here. Let me close some tabs so I make sure I know what I'm looking at. Here's another one where I was very mid-pack, and this is one where I had Harden KD in the first 2 rounds, but I wasn't as successful in the rest of the draft. Again, I ended up with a pick at the very end, the 12th pick in this one. Harden and KD actually was a perfectly reasonable start. Kevin Durant, he missed his usual complement of games, but he finished at number 25 by totals. Harden was number 5. Those 2 guys together should have been a perfectly firm foundation. Unfortunately, I completely whiffed on 4 picks in a row. Jalen Johnson at 36 looked like it was shaping up to be a very good pick. I thought this team was going to be off and running. When Jalen Johnson was playing well, this team was in really good shape. He went down, and so I lost my 3rd round pick completely. My 4th round pick was an underperforming Freddie VanVleet. 5th round pick, I don't know why I went DeAndre Ayton. I think it was because I just didn't have a big man yet, and so I did it. I should have gone with Kessler or Zubats. I should have trusted my instincts, but I was like, well, Ayton's probably going to be like, top 40 per game. And then if he sits out the last 20, no biggie. Because in this league, I thought my first 4 picks were a little bit less risky. Of course, Jalen Johnson missing most of the season blew that up. But Harden and Durant, by all accounts, were, you got about 85-ish, 80 to 85% of the games played between those 2 guys combined. So there wasn't, the risk factor didn't turn out to be the issue here. It was just that VanVleet underperformed. Jalen Johnson lost for the year. Ayton was terrible. Bradley Beal in the 6th round was also terrible. And then it was too late to make up for lost time. Because Jakob Poeltl in the 7th was solid. Drew Holiday in the 8th was not very good. Draymond Green in the 9th was fine. Naz Reid in the 10th was pretty good. Al Horford at the beginning of the year in the 11th was decent. Jonathan Isaac, no. Dyson Daniels in the 13th. Again, I had Dyson Daniels in almost every league. You will not be surprised to find out that between Dyson Daniels, Freddie VanVleet, Drew Holiday, Draymond Green, and James Harden, this team was also once again pretty good at steals, but once again had the same general issues as the last club, which is missed games from upper tier guys, kind of blew the thing apart, and then just total goofing in the middle parts. There was also I didn't set my lineup for the last month in this league, so I finished 30 games short. If I played this one out and I played my last 30 games, I probably would have been in 5th place, but it still would have been pretty far behind the top 4, which you can see I finished with 58 roto points, and I needed to get to 72 if I was going to have a chance to win any money. If I played my last 30 games, I'd probably get up into the mid 60s. And again, this is another one where I had my list of guys that I was targeting. And, we can go back and look at that anytime you want. It's all still out there in the Google sheet from the preseason. Who were the targets? I got mostly targets in this one. DeAndre Ayton was the one where it was like, what are you doing here, Dan? That should have been Zubats or Walker Kessler. And if I went those guys instead, that's another one where probably ends up another 3, 4, 5 roto points better. So kick yourself in the butt. But this is the one where I sort of clustered almost all of the targets I had that didn't work out all that great. Meaning there's always gonna be misses, and, like, if you look back at the buckets, it was the buckets tab on my Google sheet. The guys that were misses, and I'll go through at some point in the offseason and just sort of color code that stuff. The guys that I took generally too high were Freddie VanVleet, uh, Bradley Beal, although he was farther down the board, like, that one shouldn't have been that big of a deal. Um, and who the hell were we just talking about in this draft a minute ago? It wasn't KD. I guess Jalen Johnson, technically, although he was trucking until he went down. It's hard to put the blame on myself for that one. Even if he was, like, somewhat injured, it still would have been a win, but out for the year, what are you gonna do? But Freddie VanVleet, Bradley Beal, those were the 2 guys that I pretty consistently was too high on. D'Angelo Russell was the other one. But I had DeAndre Ayton in bucket 16. I have no idea why I was taking him over the likes of Walker Kessler, who is very clearly a bucket ahead of him on my board. I had Kessler way ahead of DeAndre Ayton, and I didn't take him there. And I don't know why, looking back. It makes no sense to me. Was Rudy Gobert off the board here also? I had Rudy ahead as well, and I didn't take him, and I think he was still out there. I gotta switch over to by round if I actually wanna see how this went. This was round 5? Where was I? I was the last pick of round 5. Um, was Gobert gone already? Oh, yeah, he was gone already. Centers that were still out there that I liked were Kessler, who went at the very end of round 6, Zubats in the middle of round 7. Khalil Ware went, wow, he went high in that draft. Jalen Duren, unfortunately, had just gone before me, and I think I was in a little bit of a center panic, and I was like, well, surely I can. No, because I wasn't going to have another pick for 24. I knew I wasn't going to get Kessler or Zubats if I didn't take him here. Um, and then I went Beal at the beginning of round 6, which was also weird because Darius Garland was still out there. Zach LaVine was still out there. I had these guys. No, I had Beal ahead of some of those guys. Who was still on the board that I was looking at? Zach LaVine probably should have been scooped up at that point. So the Beal one was less. That was kind of with the grain on what I had been working on. But going Ayton over Kessler made absolutely no sense. And I know that Walker Kessler wasn't exactly like a world beater from a totals standpoint because he missed 24 ball games, but he still finished at number 68 by totals. And DeAndre Ayton was outside the top 200 by totals. So it's not, it wasn't close. And I went against my own handicapping here. Would that have saved this team? I mean, questionable. It certainly would have helped with field goal percent, which I finished, bottom 4, rebounds, bottom 5, blocks. I could have made it to the top of the board. I had a pretty good blocks team when all was said and done on this club, but it could have been better. And the reason is, if we go back and look at and see how this team finished up, I made some moves and with like a month and a half to go to see if I could squeeze my way up the board. It didn't really make any difference, but Beal and Ayton being injured for most of the year, having to drop Jalen Johnson, Freddie VanVleet being out for a long time. It wasn't meant to be. I don't think that like one of the ones we talked about yesterday where I got third place that it could have easily been second or first was because I built a great head-to-head team. This team was actually relatively well-rounded. I just doinked the crap out of a few picks right in the middle. I clustered the misses, Freddie VanVleet being a miss, and Jalen Johnson being a miss because of injury, and Beal being a miss, just straight up miss, and then dodged Walker Kessler. Does that get me up to the top? Would picking Kessler over Ayton and actually playing my last 30 games of my games cap, does that get me into the money? It would have been damn close. And I think at that point, if I'm that close and knowing I'm that close, then I start to strategize, and I think I have a pretty good shot at second or third place in this league. So that's all it would have taken is just, following my own damn advice. And instead, I didn't. And obviously, I'm an idiot. Oh, well. Let's go to the next losers tab. Losers tab. So sad. There were 4. These are the 4 leagues where I didn't win any money. This one was AD and Harden. You guys can already figure out what went wrong with this team. Ended up in 5th place. Did I use my games cap up in this one? I doubt it. yeah, I left 20 games on the table here. So probably would have been within striking distance of third, fourth place if I used up my last 20 games. I probably would have gotten up to like 64, 65 roto points, but I still would have been one like good chunk behind the money, 3-4 points out of winning something. And the shame here is that this team probably should have been good because the AD Harden start to the year was excellent. Unfortunately, we know what happened with Anthony Davis. He finished at number 40 by totals because he missed 31 ball games. We needed him to miss like 20 or less, and missing 31 was a bit of a deal breaker on that one. And then if we look at the rest of the draft, and you can see, well, let's figure out where things went right or wrong. This is another one where I had to pick towards the end. There's a theme here. I want to go by team. Where am I? I was mid-end, 8th pick, so not the end of the world. I'm not that mad about taking AD 8th overall when you look at who was still there. Trae Young, I didn't want him at 8. Donovan Mitchell, I didn't want him at 8. Steph Curry, I didn't want him at 8. Joel Embiid, I didn't want him at 8. Anthony Edwards, Domantas Sabonis, Devin Booker, Jalen Brunson. James Harden was the only other player I was thinking about at 8, and I got him at 17. And then a run of unfortunate LaMelo Ball in the 3rd round. And okay, so I'm going to kick myself less about it here than I did on yesterday's show when I talked about taking him at 22. He was still out there at 32. LaMelo Ball at 32, I feel like you almost had to take. No, it didn't work out. Obviously, it didn't work out. But, Jalen Johnson, Evan Mobley, Jalen Williams were the other ones that I was considering there, and they were all reasonable. Like Jalen Johnson would have been worse than Ball. Jalen Williams, Evan Mobley would have been better, but I don't think that I did anything specifically wrong with LaMelo Ball at 32. Jimmy Butler at 41, that ended up being not great because of his holdout situation. He actually somehow finished at 67 by totals, despite just chilling for 15 games. He played in 56 out of 82. If he didn't have the holdout, he probably would have been in the high 60s to low 70s, and it would have been actually a pretty damn good pick, but the holdout screwed that one up. And, again, didn't ruin the team completely, but hurt it enough where it was kind of hard to come back from. You can see where this team was weak. What page am I looking at right now? What are you guys seeing? Oh, you guys are still seeing a previous one. There we go. Fixed it. Sorry, YouTubers. Here's that team that for those that are seeing it. So after LaMelo Ball at 32, Jimmy Butler at 41, Tobias Harris at 56. That was fine. Again, another fine pick. D'Lo at 85 was not very good. Kawhi Leonard at 80. Like that to me was actually a great pick because I don't care that he played in 25, 30 games or whatever it was. Getting Kawhi Leonard at 80 was incredible. Walker Kessler at 89 was a good one. Isaiah Hartenstein at 104 turned out fine. Chris Paul at 113. Onyeka Okongwu at 128. Norman Powell at 137. I don't like looking back at this team. I don't really understand why this team wasn't a winner. The best guess is that Anthony Davis and LaMelo Ball just didn't play in enough games. Like you got to have, because Harden gave first round value out of the second round spot, but my second best totals player on this team, I think if I'm looking at it from top to bottom, my second best totals player is probably Anthony Davis at 40. Well, where's Chris Paul? Because he played in all 44. Chris Paul's at 44. But again, that one's like a compiler kind of season. I just needed one more guy like inside the top 25 by totals, and this team would have been very, very good. So again, this is like one little thing away. But LaMelo Ball missed most of the season again, 35 games. He finished at 139 by totals. Anthony Davis missed 31 games. You can't have your top guys missing that much time. And then Butler too. Like you could go three of the top 4 guys on my team missed a crap ton of basketball. Somehow on yesterday's show, we talked about that one team where I had like the top 4 guys that all missed a ton of time and I still managed to wedge my way into 3rd. That's because in general, I think I'm pretty good at drafting. And I think the rest of my draft bears that out. Look at how many I had a ton of really good picks in this draft, but it didn't matter because my top guys just weren't there. So like, where did Tobias Harris finish by totals? Toby, 57. That's fine. He missed 9 games. That's totally reasonable. Solid. D'Lo, no. Okay, he was a miss. He was like the one miss. Kawhi at 80, love it. Kessler, Hartenstein, Paul, Okongwu, Powell, Horford. Like, this draft was pretty good, other than the fact that my first, third, and fourth round picks missed a bunch of ball games. That's the whole story. And the lesson learned here is that no matter how good you draft after that, it's too late. It's too late. And again, I left 20 games on the board. Yes, I would have been, 63, 64, probably roto points if I played out those games. My team was still very good in assists, steals, and blocks despite missing all that time. But think about it this way. If Jimmy Butler, Anthony Davis, and LaMelo Ball all play a bunch more games, threes don't get that much better, but points, boards, I would argue both percentages get a whole heck of a lot better. And as the season goes, I can look at my team and go, all right, well, my team is dominating in steals because they did. Because Chris Paul was good in steals, Norm was good in steals, Kawhi, Butler when he played, AD. I ended up, I think I picked up Dyson Daniels in this league. Look, he's on my team here. Did I trade for him or did I pick him up? I don't remember. I think I may have picked him up on like the first week of the season. So my team was absolutely smashing in a lot of important categories, but I didn't get the guys that I expected to score. Jimmy Butler, 18 to 20. Anthony Davis, 25. LaMelo is dropped, but he was in the 20s. And Norm, who missed a bunch of time also, those guys didn't play. So I just missed out on games played. This team, to me, would have walked into the money if I don't even know if I need all three of those guys to have played games. If Anthony Davis plays 70 games, I think this team probably wins money. If LaMelo plays 70 games, this team probably wins money. Like there's so many pathways that it could have gotten there. Yeah, LaMelo would have hurt field goal percent and turnovers a little bit, but like the damage that he would have done in a positive sense in threes, points, free throw percent, like obviously the good way outweighs the bad with these guys that are per game ranked inside the top 40. And LaMelo fell off at the end of the year, but you guys get it. Like Jimmy Butler, field goal, free throw percent, Goliath, points, boards, assists, all that stuff. And he was the fourth rounder. He wasn't even the most important one. Is there a lesson? Did I take too many risks? Probably. That's probably the lesson. Took too many risks. Oh well. You got to be a little bit more judicious. Like, with the Embiid team, I took risks afterwards and it didn't even matter because Embiid, you got zero. This time I didn't get zero out of those guys. Man, this one's frustrating looking back. I didn't look at it as closely as I thought before going on air. Like, that draft was good, and I just didn't get enough games played out of AD, basically. That's what crushed it. What if I had replaced Anthony Davis with Cat in this league? Would I have won money? Oh, man, it's close. I feel like the answer is probably yes. All right, let's look at the last loser. This is AD Trey was the top two. And I like this one right out of the gate. I don't know why I drafted Trey Young. I don't know why I drafted Trey Young. I told you guys 1,000 times I wanted nothing to do with him in roto leagues, and I did it anyway. He wasn't bad from totals. He was number 32, but like that's because he played in 77 ball games. If somebody plays in 77 games and you're drafting him at the top of the board, you're hoping that like Harden, they're a first rounder. But Trey was number 51 per game this year. Yeah, he and Harden both had really bad turnovers and both had really bad field goal percent, but Harden just smoked him in most of the other important stuff. James was number 15 because the free throw was almost exactly the same. Scoring very close. Trey actually beat him in assists, but Harden was at 2.2 defensive stats. Trey was at 1.4. He had 2 extra rebounds a game, if I'm not right, almost 3. And I think he had more threes by a little bit. That stuff adds up. I thought I could get away with it in this league because of having Anthony Davis. Like, well, I got so many steals and blocks out of my first guy that if I take a point guard with my second pick, that it's not gonna hurt me that much. Again, this is another one where I didn't bother to finish out my games cap. I left 30 on the table. If I finish the games cap out, I almost definitely finish like right around fourth place. But again, there was a pretty good gap between fourth and third. And that gap, as we'll see when we go to the draft results, is because, for one, Trae Young, not a good roto pick. What pick did I have in this draft? Uh, Fifth. This should have gone better. That's upsetting. If I go Halliburton instead of AD in this, everything completely changes. So Lauri Markkanen in the third, bad pick, which is a weird one too, because on leading up to it, I very specifically said I don't want Lauri Markkanen anywhere near this, and I have him in bucket 11 on my. If you go all the way back to my buckets board, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 16, 21, 27, 31. So like I have him at the very end of the third round on my buckets board here for roto only. And I took him a full half round before that, which was dumb because let's see, Evan Mobley was still there. JJJ was still there. Freddie VanVleet, who I normally took, was still there. Jalen Johnson was still there. I don't I don't know why I did that. Jalen Williams was still there. Why the hell did I take Larry Markkinen? I went against my crap again. I had Jalen Williams, Jalen Johnson, Freddie VanVleet. Who else did I already rattle off as right next to him? Mobley, I had in sort of like a similar spot, but without the tank concerns. I had a solid 4 guys that I should have taken over Markkinen and I had on my board, and I just didn't do it. I don't know why. I don't know why. But obviously that was stupid. Derek White in the 4th round was good. Tobias Harris in the 5th was fine. Bradley Beal again, not good. Michael Porter Jr. in the 7th, fine. Pirtle in the 8th, fine. Hartenstein in the 9th, solid. Jalen Suggs was going great in the 10th until he went down. And my last 3 of Middleton, Norman Powell, and Jonathan Isaac. So one of those 3 hit. This is another one where, 2nd and 3rd round. That's where this thing came apart. Trae Young was still there at 20. And like, by all accounts, that's a spot where you should be able to take Trae Young and build around him. And he played in enough games where he didn't ruin my team. But then following that up with a Larry Markkinen who just was basically a goose egg, that made it very, very hard to come back from, even though, again, the rest of this draft wasn't that bad. So this draft was, again, derailed by my first round pick being too injured, combined with a third round pick that was too injured. Trae Young played, how many games did Trae play this year? 77. He only missed 5. Anthony Davis, though, missed 31. And I don't even, Markkinen missed 35. So 66 games missed out of my first and third round picks combined. It's just too many. So again, if I had finished out my 30 games cap and I had taken a third rounder who played 65 games and was solid, this team probably again wins money. Not necessarily just like coasting to a top 3, because the top 3 had very good teams. So I don't want to like say that I was just going to jump them. But like if I played my 30 games cap and I replace Larry Markkinen with someone of any reasonable value, this team probably ends up maybe 2-3 points out of the money. And at that point, I think I could win it on strategy, which I didn't bother to do in this league either. Like I would have looked to see what categories I could make a run in. And we talked about that on, which one was it? It was this league, the one Jokic Booker, where I went all threes. Look at that. That's a beautiful thing. I got 39 threes on the last day to lock up first place. Like if I'm getting into the strategy of it, no one's going to beat me in that. And by the way, it's worth noting that this AD trade team was in first place at the beginning of the year until I lost a bunch of players to injury that basically never came back. So Markkinen, Anthony Davis, and this, like, the whole thing came apart at that point. There were long stretches where I had 5, 6 guys with injured tags. I probably needed to drop them, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I even picked up Tari Eason. Like this team was good, but you're not going to win if your top 3 picks, specifically your top 2, don't play games. They've got to play. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. So if Anthony Davis is dead, I needed a third round pick that was going to be better. And neither one of those things happened. Well. I don't know. I have no idea what my kid is shrieking over the other one playing piano in the background. Congratulations. You've joined us for a more traditional spring break morning where neither kid is at a 1-week camp. Oh, dear Lord. Thanks for watching, everybody. This was the Losers Edition and Lessons Learned. Starting tomorrow, we'll pivot more into sort of the broad strokes. How do we apply this stuff going forward? This was like, we're human. We're human. 3 of those 4 teams that we went over today were so very close to being second or third place type potential teams. And you just, you know, having Bradley Beal in too many places was obviously sort of a killer because he was very good to finish last season, and just none of that carried over. Now the Suns have detonated the place, so, like, that was a mess. That was a chemistry mess. That was just bad. Everything about that was bad. They brought in depth, and somehow Bradley Beal was the guy that got aced out. Uh, and yet, at the end of it all, could have won money in almost all of those leagues if I didn't go Embiid in the first one we talked about, if I didn't go Anthony Davis in the middle ones, which is a damn shame too, because until he re-aggravated his injury in Dallas, he was still going to be fine. It was the re-aggravation, playing too soon and then missing a month and a half. If it wasn't that, he misses about 15 games, and these teams are competitive. But that was it. That first game in Dallas, he looked incredible, and then down go 2 of my fantasy teams, just like that. I'll be back tomorrow. I got nothing else for you. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad. Later, everybody. Thanks for watching.